Hello and welcome everybody to yet another in the long saga of how we're meeting during the COVID era. So we hope you're doing well and are fully vaccinated by now. We're live on Zoom and live streaming to YouTube. Thanks for joining us. However you're able to do so, I'm glad to have you here. I'll introduce our special guest and friend of the CFFC, Seth Andrews, in just a moment. But before that, a reminder to be sure to join us on Meetup. For the next few weeks, you will have access to the Zoom login, so you can join us live. And in just a few short months, these events will be back in person, and we don't want you to miss out on the details of those events. More information very soon. A quick tease, we are hoping for that first back in-person event on September 19th, but that's not confirmed yet. So join the meetup to get that information as soon as it's available. You can do that at meetup.com/CFL Freethought. I'll drop that into the chat. Join us there, RSVP for upcoming events, and then put them on your calendar. Today's event is part of our recurring educational series. You can find all of our past educational events and follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/CFL Freethought. If you prefer to hear about those events via monthly emails, you can go to tinyurl.com or tinyurl.com/CFFC newsletter. So you can sign up there. Give us your contact information, as much or as little as you want, at least your email, and we promise to keep you up to date on upcoming events. Of course, we hope you're already following us on Facebook at CFL Freethought. If you're with us in the Zoom meeting today, you can find the chat option available at the bottom of your screen on your computer. Feel free to chat with everyone there. If you're on a mobile device, just tap the screen and that should appear as an option. And chat is where we want you to ask questions today. So put those in there and we'll get to as many as we can. And we probably will open up the mics a little bit later on too, time permitting, and we'll be able to talk. Also, your microphone will be kept on mute, so you don't accidentally interrupt the presentation. And if you keep your camera on, that's great. We want to see that you dressed today, at least from the waist up, but please try to avoid any distractions, falling asleep, showing us your lap or your forehead for long periods of time. Okay, Zoomers, let's not do that. I think we're all experienced here, most of us anyway. We have a few exciting news items to share with you before we begin. First, we have several of our Freethought Cafe events happening in person again, beginning in June, but for those of you who aren't able to attend for any reason, there will still be online cafe events in June and July for sure, perhaps longer. And we'll see how things go. Hopefully. Looks like we had a mute issue there. Okay, so you can join us online if you're not Zoomed out, or you can join us in person. So we'll announce those events very soon. Huge thanks to everyone who donated time, money, or who ordered supplies for our Secular Week of Action event earlier this month. In conjunction with the One Orlando Alliance's Acts of Love and Kindness initiative, the CFFC prepared 150 hygiene kits to support Central Floridians in the LGBTQ+ community that are in housing distress. And we dropped those off at the Center, a service and support organization here in Orlando. And your help in that was invaluable, as we raised nearly $2,000 for that event and donated all the supplies and remaining funds directly to the center. And before we begin today, be sure to mark your calendar for the next Zoom educational event. We'll host our friend and ally, Representative Carlos Smith of the 47th District in the Florida House of Representatives. He will give us a good, bad, and ugly update, mostly bad and ugly, but there's some good in there, from the recently finished session of the Florida legislature. Carlos has spoken to us twice before and even kicked off Free Flow 2019 with the welcome address. And for those of you who don't know, Free Flow is the biennial conference of the Florida Humanist Association. And speaking of Free Flow, the next conference has been scheduled, and I want to stop and make sure you are able to mark your calendar. So stop what you're doing. If you're distracted, pull out your calendar app, grab your quill pen and your Franklin Covey planner. I want you to document this. Everyone ready? You have your calendars ready? That event will be Orlando, March 4th, 5th, and 6th of 2022. So just about 10 months from now. The venue is the Marriott Orlando Airport Lakeside, which is right down the street from the previous venues, very close to the Orlando International Airport. It is too early for a rundown of speakers since we only have a few confirmed, but it is my privilege to announce the first confirmed speaker at Free Flow 2022, the man who needs no introduction because I've spoken far too much already and taken all of his time. host and majority shareholder of the Thinking Atheist Universal Empire, Seth Andrews. Welcome, sir.
Good to be here, my friend. I'm excited about doing an in-person event. I mean, I know we've adapted as best we can, but there's just nothing like sharing a room with people who don't think you're insane or going through a midlife crisis or an agent of Satan. Yeah, that would be refreshing for me, because I live in Bible Belt, Oklahoma. I'm going to try to share my screen. Are you ready for me to proceed, David? I don't know if you were finished with your announcements.
We'll chat afterwards, so take it away.
I'm going to dip back into the last several years because some of what has been driving me crazy. In fact, I had tentatively titled my presentation "Grinding My Teeth." I have to dip backward into the last few years to give a little bit of context. I'm going to attempt to screen share. So hopefully you're able to see my screen and my PowerPoint.
Looks great.
I was getting my teeth cleaned. Okay. This was last year. This is right before COVID kicked in. I go in every 6 months, and dentist is a tennis playing friend of mine. We play on the court, but he's also my dentist, right? And so the dental hygienist is doing that. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Seth, did you know that you grind your teeth?" And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I mean, apparently, you can see a little bit of an evidence that you grind your teeth. And of course, my first thought was, I'm an atheist in Oklahoma, all right, in the Bible Belt. People are always asking me what it's like to be an atheist activist in this state, in the Bible Belt, which I affectionately also call the divorce belt. And it's also the teen pregnancy belt, and it is the meth belt. It is the porn use belt. Out of the 50 states ranked for online porn usage, Oklahoma ranked number 5, right? Bible Belt, red state, Jesus loving Oklahoma is 5th for online porn in the country. By the way, Mississippi is at number 3. Arkansas was 6. Louisiana and Florida, you guys are tied at number 8, followed closely by Texas. Now, interestingly to me, the hugely Mormon Utah ranked number 1 for online porn. And of course, this leans right into a Magic Mormon underwear joke, right? But I saw this line, I saw a meme online, it made me laugh out loud. It said, "Naked and afraid, Mormons on their wedding night." But I think that is just totally appropriate. We'll talk about a monumental Olympic level of sexual dysfunction. And we see this in fundamental religions and cults like the Mormon church. Here in my home state, we have people like Governor Stitt. He says things like this, right? "I pray and tell our team when we get together, we have an opportunity to join in with what God is doing in Oklahoma," right? He's a Bible-waving bullhorn for Christian privilege. You guys know what this is like in Florida. This is a state where 79% of the residents here, they claim some flavor of Christianity. That's more than 3 in 4. If you want a snapshot of the kind of thing that we have to deal with all the time, we non-Christians in the state of Oklahoma. Check out this story. It's an absolutely true story from back in 2015. The Oklahoma State Supreme Court declared that this 10 Commandments monument on the state capitol grounds was unconstitutional. This was installed 9 years ago, back in 2012, but it supported a specific religion, and it did so on taxpayer-funded public property. So the Supreme Court, the Oklahoma State Supreme Court, ruled that it had to be removed. Well, you can imagine the response by Oklahoma Christians. They just lost their minds, right? This went over just like this, despite the fact that religious literacy surveys revealed that 60% of Americans, including Oklahomans, can't even name 5 of the 10 commandments. They know all the words to Bohemian Rhapsody. They do not know even half of the allegedly most important rules for living ever given to humankind by their God. So Oklahoma ordered by the state Supreme Court to remove the monument from the Capitol grounds. Well, this was not going to be allowed to stand. And again, this is a true story. The Glory Riders from Texoma Cowboy Church in Wichita Falls, they decided something had to be done. So they left Texoma Cowboy Church in Wichita Falls and they rode 130 miles to the Oklahoma State Capitol, carrying their own engraved copy of the 10 Commandments. So they made their own 10 Commandments, and there's the guy holding his stone tablet that they had engraved. And they delivered it to the then governor of Oklahoma, Mary Fallin, and they did so on the Capitol steps. And she came out and met them. She received them. She accepted the plaque and prayed with them and thanked them for standing for Christian values in Oklahoma. Speaking of the 10 Commandments, Roy Moore, former Alabama Chief Supreme Court Justice, this is a guy who was accused of sexually assaulting minors. He received funding from white supremacist groups. The man endorsed by President Trump 1 week before a special election back in 2017. He declared the Bible's 10 Commandments are the foundation of moral law in the United States. He was behind the installation of a 10 Commandments monument on government property back in 2001. That was ruled unconstitutional and it was ordered removed, and he refused to do it. And he was suspended as Alabama Chief Justice. So he installed this monument in his office, and then he ran for Alabama Senate in November of last year. Just a few things is terrifying in my mind as the idea of using the Bible as moral law. And this has been tried. There's an author and satirist and comedian. He writes for Esquire. His name is A.J. Jacobs. He penned a book 6 years ago called The Year of Living Biblically. And he decided he was going to spend 12 months. He was going to limit himself to the specific edicts of the Christian Bible. 1 full year of living biblically. And this included not shaving his beard. And this is actually a chronicling of how he looked for every month until the end of December. Now, Leviticus 19 says you're not supposed to trim your beard. He refused to wear mixed fabrics. He wouldn't touch his wife during her period because, of course, the Bible said that she was unclean. He made friends open his refrigerator for him on the Sabbath because, you can't do that. It constitutes labor or work. If he ran into a suggestive photograph in a magazine, he would cover it up with tape, right? Because we don't want to be tempted with carnal things. He refused to eat shellfish. And of course, this leans into the book of Leviticus, chapter 11, because shrimp and lobster are an abomination unto the Lord. Here he is blowing a ram's horn to usher in the Jubilee. Obviously, by the beard, this was late in his specific journey. Now, here's the interesting thing. When he tried to live biblically, A.J. Jacobs discovered that he couldn't actually do it. Because, of course, and you're well ahead of me on this score, the Bible commands the execution of gay people, the stoning of adulterers. Actually, there's a great exchange in his book. He found this older guy. He was talking about relationships and love, and he got the guy to admit that he had had sex outside of marriage. And so A.J. Jacobs named him as an adulterer and reached down on the ground and pulled out some lawn pebbles and just started pelting. He stoned him with lawn pebbles, because he was an adulterer. And he almost got his ass kicked by this old man. I mean, it's just awesome. It's a great story. He wasn't going to kick his wife out of the house during her menstrual cycle. That's in the Old Testament as well, right? When you're unclean, you're menstruating, you have to leave the village for 7 days. He didn't do that. And there's so much that the guy had to skip over and adjust because the idea of a year of living biblically is really, really terrifying. It's like a meme that's floating around on the web, and I've shared it many times. It says, let's play a game. Open the Bible to a random passage, do exactly what it says. Last one to go to jail wins. And yet, how many times in this country are we being told that the foundation of the United States is the Christian Bible? It's Pastor Robert Jeffress, mega pastor of First Baptist Church of Dallas. He thinks so. He was on Donald Trump's evangelical advisory board. Again, why is a state church separated government having an evangelical advisory board? That's a question for another day, but it's still a good question. Pastor Jeffress did a speech in 2018 in June. It's called America is a Christian Nation. And he said this:
America was not founded as a nation that is neutral toward Christianity. America was founded as a Christian nation.
Now, were you able to hear that? I may have to actually enable audio for you to be able to hear that. I didn't know. Dave, could you hear the audio of that?
Yep, sounded great.
Okay, good. Thank you. The United States belongs to Jeffress's God. Its leaders are God ordained. Its purpose is to do the will of God. This is Paula White, batshit crazy scam evangelist from the Trump inauguration, consecrating the marriage of this country and her specific God.
And join our nation to your purpose. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. The psalmist declared, let your favor be upon this one nation under God. Let these United States of America be that beacon of hope to all people and nations under your dominion. A true hope for humankind.
Sorry about that. I wanted to give you a little more volume. This is an inauguration that was funded with our tax dollars, right? Tax dollars of Christians and Catholics and Muslims and Jews and Hindus, Buddhists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Jainists, Sikhs, Wiccans, Taoists, deists, seculars, atheists. We all paid for this Christian church service. This is the same Paula White who claimed that she answered Trump's call to serve in the White House because saying no to Trump would be like saying no to God. These are her words. This is the Paula White who enjoyed and continues to a massive net worth while asking her audience to send money to her so that their lives won't end in disaster.
I am speaking prophetically by the Holy Spirit, and you are to sow a $3,000 seed. When you obey the voice of the Lord and you do what God's telling you to do, you need to send in $35,000. You need to send in that $100,000 check. I'm telling you, and God has mandated, if you do not write that P.O. box and you do not call that toll-free number and you do not become a ministry of sustainer, you will never see sustainment in your life and your dream will die.
Holy shit, your dream will die if you don't send Paula White your money. I don't know how many, I think she's worth at least $5 million, if not more. Interesting that Carlin quote comes to mind, you know, where God, the God who threatens you with hell, loves you and he needs money or your dream will die. This is one of the reasons, she remains one of the reasons that I grind my teeth.
I am speaking prophetically by the Holy Spirit, and you are to sow a $3,000 seed. When you obey the voice of the Lord and you do what God's telling you to do, you need to send in $35,000. You need to send in that $100,000 check.
$100,000. Right? Apparently, Paula White skipped over that commandment in the New Testament. 1 Timothy chapter 2 says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. The God she's pitching essentially disqualified her from preaching to or teaching or instructing or exerting spiritual authority over freaking half of the population of the world. From the local courts to the Supreme Court, there is this mad dash, this scramble by evangelicals. They want to secure as much power as humanly possible. The former energy secretary of Donald Trump, the appointment made by Trump, Rick Perry, said that Donald Trump's the chosen one sent by God to do great things. By the way, Trump himself called himself the chosen one. It's bizarre to hear him talk about this because the commandments say, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Trump has announced his own omniscience. He knows everything.
Nobody knows this stuff better than me.
Nobody knows more about taxes than I do and income than I do.
Nobody knows more about construction than I do.
Nobody knows more about campaign finance than I do.
I know more about drones than anybody. Nobody knows much more about technology this type of technology, certainly, than I do.
Nobody knows more about technology than me. Nobody in the history of this country has ever known so much about infrastructure as Donald Trump.
I know the H-1B. I know the H-2B. Nobody knows it better than me.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me.
I understand things. I comprehend very well, okay? Better than, I think, almost anybody.
And by the way, who knew the other side of the picture better than me? I knew it. Nobody knows more about environmental impact statements than me.
I understand the power of Facebook, maybe better than almost anybody. I know more about renewables than any human being on Earth.
Nobody knows more about polls than me. I know more about courts than any human being on Earth.
I know more about steelworkers than anybody that's ever run for office.
I know more about golf than Obama knows.
Nobody knows more about banks than I do. Nobody knows more about trade than me. Well, obviously, he doesn't know about nuclear weapons. I know more about nuclear weapons than he'll ever know.
I understand the tax laws better than almost anyone.
Who knows more about lawsuits than I do? I'm the king. I know more about offense and defense than they will ever understand.
And nobody even understands it but me. It's called devaluation.
I understand money better than anybody.
I understand the system better than anybody.
Nobody knows more about debt than I do.
Nobody knows the game better than me.
I know more about contributions than anybody.
And who knows more about the word apprentice than Donald Trump?
I understand politicians better than anybody. Nobody knows politicians better than me.
Who knows the other side better than me?
Who knows the other side better than me?
I think I know more about the other side than almost anybody.
And I understand the other side. Perhaps I understand it better than anybody else.
I was the fair-haired boy. Nobody knows more about it than me. I know more than these politicians. These guys don't know anything.
I know a lot. I know more than I'm ever going to tell you. The truth is, I'm actually a modest person, very modest.
Okay.
It's true.
So I got to talk about Trump, even though he was not elected in the 2020 presidential election. The reason I talk about him is because he remains deified by many evangelical Republicans who have anointed him as their savior figure. He is called by God, and so as a result, any opposition to Donald Trump is considered an attack on God. The opposition is satanic. We're seeing flavors of this with QAnon, etc. You know, it boggles my mind to see evangelicals pandering to this obvious con. You know, Mr. 2 Corinthians, he can't or won't name one favorite scripture out of the Bible that he's supposed to know everything about. You know, American Christianity believes he is the chosen one. Cult expert Stephen Hassan, I've had him on the podcast. He wrote a book called The Cult of Trump. And one of the symptoms of this cult mentality leans back into evangelist Franklin Graham. He was also at the inauguration back in 2017 on January the 20th. Franklin Graham declared that God even bends the weather as a kind of baptism on Trump from on high.
Mr. President, in the Bible, rain is a sign of God's blessing. And it started to rain, Mr. President, when you came to the platform.
What the okay, right? What is more likely? That God changed the weather to baptize the chosen one, or that Washington, D.C. sees 9 days of average rainfall in the month of January every single year? Mega Pastor John Hagee declared we're a Christian nation. He's a Christian Zionist. We're seeing some of this now with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israel seen as Zion, part of the apocalypse, part of the end times narrative, God's chosen people on God's chosen land. He doesn't see the state of Israel as merely the establishment of a nation for Jews. He thinks that this establishment of Zion marks the return of the Jews to Zion. This marks the return of Jesus Christ. We saw, this was 2 years ago, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told the Christian Broadcasting Network that Trump may be divinely appointed like Queen Esther to protect God's people by fortifying the Jewish state of Israel. I need to go back. Hang on. Trump had just recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now, Pompeo did not see this as a logical or human event or a legitimate political national move. He saw it as something that was biblical, prophesied by Scripture. It's foreign policy framed in Christianity. This is former Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos. She's in charge, or was in charge, of America's public school system. Even though she was never an educator and her children never attended public schools, she's on record saying that she thinks that the reforms of education should, quote, advance God's kingdom, her specific God, the Christian God. You're no stranger to this phenomenon in Florida. We got taxpayer-funded schools in your state, Louisiana, South Dakota. They are now legally required to conspicuously display religious banners invoking God. You've got Project Blitz, this organization which has brought more than 75 to 80 bills in 20 states over a 2-year period, promoting the privilege of a single religion in this country, the religion of Christianity. Got Bibles and Christian prayers in public schools, religious excuses for discrimination against non-Christians, against gays, Muslims, etc. You have biblically informed prohibitions on female reproductive choice. You have the embedding of one single religion in a nation that's supposed to separate the church and the state while representing people of all faiths and none. Alabama, actually 25 white men in Alabama voted into law a draconian bill to restrict the reproductive rights of women. They did it on the basis of the Bible, signed into law by the governor, Alabama Governor Kay Ivey, herself a devout Christian. She said her reason for signing the bill was rooted in the belief that her God, untroubled with the every life question when it comes to the freaking death penalty, because they shortened the processes to kill people with the death penalty. She has decided that this is a religious question, the moral question rooted in the Bible. But she loves the death penalty, which I'm guessing means she's a fan of Old Testament justice. People like us, we pull up a chair and we hold up a finger and we say, this is not right. We challenge this foisting of Christian laws and a theocratic government upon all of us. And then the Christian nationalists cry persecution, and they do it with this catchy little phrase. They say religious freedom or religious liberty. This is former U.S. Attorney William Barr complaining about those militant secularists. We are on the attack, you and me, allegedly on the attack against our own country. We say religion's a private thing, not a government thing. They say religious freedom is under attack. Public schools aren't churches, Christian churches. Christian monuments shouldn't be on state capitol grounds. You can't discriminate against non-Christians. You shouldn't pitch a national religion. We're not a theocracy, and you certainly don't have permission to monopolize power. We say these reasonable things, and they scream religious freedom. We are under attack. One of the best examples, Donald Trump, he's saying that, well, we made it impossible for people to say Merry Christmas. We were forcing people to say Happy Holidays because we hate Christmas. We want to cancel Christmas because we hate the baby Jesus. This is this total bogus narrative, right? And then he came forward shortly after and said, you can now say Merry Christmas in this country again, thanks to me. But it's an interesting phenomenon. It's the straw man. They decided, or they declared rather, that we are all under attack and that those non-Christians or those who want to separate the state church line essentially hate God and want to cancel everything that has to do with God. Therefore, we are on a holy war, kind of a righteous jihad in the name of Yahweh. And everywhere we look, America is under attack. Or else do we have to look other than Fox News for this? You see the words attack and in God we trust on so much of what they're about. We saw Bill O'Reilly doing the war on Christmas thing a while back. What do our heathen attackers look like? They look like you and me, you and I, called the attack mob. Because why? Because we have the audacity to say, wait a minute, you've got it wrong. You shouldn't do this. This is not what the founders intended. It's not right. It's not logical. It's not moral. It's not just. There is a famous Emerson quote that I just love, where he said, let me never fall into the vulgar mistake of dreaming that I am persecuted whenever I am contradicted. Christian privilege does not like to be contradicted. And so it declares it's being persecuted, under attack by those awful, un-American, even treasonous liberals and secular humanists. and atheists. There was a Fox News opinion piece. Anthony Stefano, he said back in 2018 that atheists are bullies. We want to intimidate everybody else into silence. We're the most arrogant, ignorant, and dangerous people on earth. We've caused more deaths, murders, and bloodshed than any other belief system in the history of the world. And American evangelicals are lapping this stuff up like it is sweet, sweet nectar. Political scientists Ryan Burge and Paul Jupe surveyed over 1,000 white evangelicals in May of 2019 in this country, 1,000 white evangelicals, and they ask a few questions about how different groups see each other. The majority of white evangelicals were terrified that everybody else was going to strip away their rights. 60% of white evangelicals believe that atheists, you and me, we were going to disallow First Amendment rights and liberties. We're going to essentially scratch out the Constitution, declare war on our Constitution. More than 58% said Democrats would prevent them from being able to have rallies, to teach, to speak freely, or run for public office. This is almost 2 in 3 white evangelicals genuinely believe this. 32% of white evangelicals, they would give atheists a right to speak and teach and run for office. Wait a minute, that's not even a third. That means 2/3 would not want us to have the right to speak out loud or to teach or to run for office. Conversely, 65% of atheists would give devout Christians the right to speak, teach, or run for office. Now, that number is still alarmingly low, but it's pretty much twice of what the evangelicals are doing. We're not saying that you don't have the right to believe. We're saying you don't have the right to force the rest of us to believe or to co-opt the country. 53% of Democrats said that they would do the same. And by this measure, then, who is being more faithful to the United States Constitution? Well, it's the liberals and it's the humanists and it is the atheists. Yet this notion that Christianity is persecuted continues to sell extremely well. And who is buying it? The evangelicals, people like most everybody in my community, my parents, most of my siblings, many of my neighbors. And it's interesting to watch them maneuver, They're screaming persecution in what is arguably the most religiously liberated nation on planet Earth. They are free to hold and express a personal faith. They can pray independently or they can get together in groups. They can attend worship anytime, any day, no restrictions. You want to have a religious assembly? Fantastic. The Bible, absolutely free. You can have religious Jesus t-shirts, cross necklaces. You can get tattoos with your faith on it. Christian radios everywhere, Christian televisions. Buy the albums, go to the concerts, buy the books. There are Christian bookstores all over this town and all over the United States. How about those Jesus fish bumper stickers or honk if you love Jesus window stickers? Yard signs that profess your faith. You can have religious symbols on your property. I mean, look, every Christmas, how many baby Jesuses and crosses during Easter, etc. You can take mission trips. You can proselytize and evangelize all you want with absolute latitude. And yet the best Christians, according to the Bible, are also martyrs. In fact, this is scriptural. The book of Matthew says, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me." Well, if you live in this religiously free, monumentally liberated nation, and there is no real persecution going on, how do you then fulfill that crusader narrative to be the greatest soldier in God's army that you can be? You manufacture the persecution. And then you use that persecution narrative to excuse and entrench your dominance over everybody else. And then we had Donald Trump doing so much damage during 4 years. As the evangelicals were using him, he was using them to consolidate as much power as possible. Lower courts and the upper courts. We saw the Supreme Court. Yeah, submit the bill, stack the courts, appoint the administrators, seize the day. The hour is short. Nick Fish, president of American Atheist, had it right. He said this administration, smash and grab for Christian nationalists, get everything they can while they can until everything implodes around them. Judges, exemptions, money, everything, anything that isn't nailed down. Why the desperation? Why this push? Well, the Pew Research Center survey of religion in this country reveals a steady decline in the number of people who identify as Christian. There's also a steady rise in the religiously unaffiliated, not necessarily atheists, but these people, their religion is not a meaningful or necessary part of their lives, right? The religious nones, N-O-N-E-S. This reflects a quarter of Americans right now in this country. That number really goes up with the 29 and under crowd. So the future of this country is refreshingly less religious. It's certainly not evangelical Christian. So Christian nationalists see the writing on the wall. They are losing their minds. They know their days are numbered, the tide is turning, and they are going to have to share the table with the rest of us. And I think this should give us some hope about the long game. I think this desperation of the Christian nationalists reveals that they really can kind of see the future. They see an increasingly less religious America, the people who don't want a theocracy. They want to see the constitutional state church line protected, and those Americans vote. The opponents of Christian nationalism, we do not want to make religious belief illegal. We don't want to shut down churches. We don't want to keep people from saying Merry Christmas or celebrating Christmas however they see fit. We don't want to abolish private prayer. We don't want to outlaw the Bible. We don't want to infringe on authentic constitutional religious liberty. We just simply realize that our founding fathers purposely designed a nation that was not ever supposed to be a church. My friend and constitutional attorney, Andrew Seidel, said this in a tweet back in December of 2019, and I saved it because I just love it. He said, "Dear white evangelicals, we're not coming for your rights. We're coming for your privilege. You'll be able to worship as you see fit so long as you don't use government power to promote your religion or use your religion to violate another's rights." Hey, you know, the Christian Nation crowd, the infect American law with the Bible crowd, the discriminate against other human beings crowd. We're not coming for your rights, but we are coming for your privilege. And that tide is indeed turning. It's slowly turning, but it's turning. We are evolving as a country. At the grassroots level, at the everyday citizen level, we are less and less interested in being told who we are, what to think, how to act. And we are seeing Christian nationalism seeing the writing on the wall. Its days are numbered. The future is coming. Anyway, that is my word of encouragement to you. I think that the work that you are doing at the Florida Freethought events, with the activism that you're doing, with the prayers, the invocations, standing against religious privilege in the city council sessions, just being activist in your own life, connecting with other people. I think you are helping to empower those to speak out. You are reminding those who are nones or not religious or not Christian nationalists that they are not alone. And you in that way are genuinely going to be a key part of helping to move this nation away from a theocracy, away from the powerful and the privileged who are weaponizing the name of God. And you are going to help us return to the intent and spirit of the Constitution, where Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. So give yourselves credit, keep kicking, keep the non-faith, and thank you all very much.
Fantastic. all that silence is everybody applauding, Seth. You know, you have to just trust me on that.
I hear you in the Lord. I hear the Lord has brought that into my ears miraculously. So.
Why is it that most of the people I know never get tired of the pretending like we're religious and being funny?
Jesus jokes are just funny to me. I don't know. It's, but maybe it has something to do with the fact that I was always walking on eggshells. But now, like the Jesus memes and like I saw one the other day where it showed Jesus carrying the cross and he looked really irritated. And it said the passive aggression of the Christ. And Jesus says, "Oh, fine, I'll carry it." I just thought that's my kind of humor. I just like that stuff. So anyway, I appreciate you guys allowing me to do my thing. I hope it was mildly engaging and entertaining. So.
Absolutely. Questions are starting to roll in. So I'll let you peruse that if you like. I will harvest them. If you speak slowly enough and talk long enough, I'll grab some more. I've got a couple of things that I've thought about here, including one is, thanks for the Trump revisit. I think we were all looking forward to as much of Donald Trump today as we could get. So good job on that.
I struggle with that, David. I have purposefully not been posting at all really about him, except I think I posted some stuff about the golden calf statue that they had at CPAC. But I am enjoying his slide into irrelevance, despite the fact that, he is still worshipped by people like my parents. But I don't want to fuel people speaking his name any more than I have to. But it's impossible to address the poison of Christian nationalism without talking about the overt Christian nationalism of the last 4 years. And that's the reason I did that. So It grieves me to utter his name, but I felt it was a necessity.
No, it is. And you're forgiven. And that was certainly joking, but we can't forget what happened, right? Because we had this conversation amongst ourselves as voters in 2016 and 2015 about, how bad could it be? And I'm not saying that was the position I'm taking, but that was the question we were all saying is what if this happens? And I don't know that we had any idea that it would go that way. Forget about COVID. I mean, even without that. But no, thanks for mentioning that and apology accepted. So the one question I noticed, and I'll pull some more out here, is I think it's pronouncing it correctly, BJ Price on YouTube, if I'm saying that right. She sees the religious right in Canada acting in the same fashion as she sees the religious right acting in the US. So, that's kind of the comment. But her question was, and it's a painful one, Seth, but you've answered it before. Was there ever a time when you would have been okay with someone speaking for the government asking for religious seed money, which is, I think, kind of what you alluded to early in your presentation there? What would you have thought of that in your Christian days?
When I was a devout evangelical, I would like to think I would have even then seen through somebody like Trump, who was not even a true believer. I think he knew the power of weaponizing Godspeak and the Christians to consolidate power. I'd like to think, I was skeptical about those guys. I didn't like Oral Roberts. I thought was a scammer, and some of these other people. I mean, I did engage the skeptical part of my brain in that way, but I was also raised to believe that we were founded by devout Christians, Washington and Jefferson and John Adams and James Madison and Benjamin Franklin were all devout Jesus believers, praise God. I'd done no actual learning about who they were, but I just knew they were all God believers, validating my faith. And I was indoctrinated in Christian school to return us to our Christian roots. So if I had seen like a Ronald Reagan, speaking, waxing on about God and God empowering people, and if I had seen taxpayer funds going into Christian incentives or organizations or endeavors, I would have felt validated, and I would have supported, and I might have even donated to it when I was a devout believer. Yeah, because I genuinely believed that we were a Christian nation to our core. And so that was my way of perhaps fueling it and helping to bring that more to pass.
Yeah. And I have some friends in the clergy. I think most of them understand my position, and we don't talk about those things about which we disagree most significantly. But I think, a lot of people feel that way, not just the religious leaders that you see, on TV and in the photographs that you showed. In fact, the one where everybody's got their hands on the back of President Trump, Paula White was there, who's from Apopka. Pastor Todd Lamphere, who we basically had to run out of Apopka High School several years ago in the Venue Church debacle there. They had 3 schools and they were trying to take over all of them. And then I can't think of the other gentleman, but there's one more. I mean, these three of those people are from Central Florida. Todd was there because of Paula White, but this is a Florida problem as much as it is anywhere else. And that's what I hear every time I talk to people about what all is going on in the country, whether it's, you or American Atheists or FFRF. It's like we are part of the problem, but that means we've got more work to do here, and we have to be buckling down and taking it seriously. And thanks for your call on at the end there for us to do that. So someone, I don't have the name here. Oh yes, it's Reggie. Nope, before that one. It was George. He says, you mentioned on your last podcast that your father, a staunch Christian, was in his final days of life. Have you decided how you are going to handle your communication with him to dispel his fear of you burning in hell, as you stated?
Well, I saw him yesterday. I'm doing these, I'm going by and, I'm bringing food, he's eating soft food. So I'm bringing like potato soup and watermelon, these kind of mild things. Dad has got leukemia, pulmonary fibrosis. His lungs are shutting down. He's on oxygen. I think he's just waiting. And we could lose him tonight. We could lose him in 2 months. I mean, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, but we know that because he's on the bubble, that if we're going to see him, it is important to try to make that happen, to have that contact. And our relationship has been so sketchy for so long. I think we're both trying in our way to connect as father and son. There's a lot that's unspoken. There's so much under the surface. And I feel that we are talking about everything but. So how's your, I'm playing tennis today. How's your game going? How's your dog doing? How's Natalie's work doing? They never ask me how my work is. How's Natalie's job going? A lot of small talk. And the nature of the small talk makes me very aware of how small it is and how it may be a compensation or a way to fill the space for all the things that he would like to say. And, I sent him a message the other day that said, I know you feel the time is short, and I know you worry about me, but know that you raised a good son who is doing his best to live a good life, and that a worthy God will reward the integrity of that. And he seemed to respond positively to that. It was, if I'm interpreting it right, he seemed to, for the first time, begin to soften. And when I saw him yesterday, even though he's almost too weak to stand, when I had to leave, I got up and he just out of nowhere stood himself up out of the chair. And he was really wobbly. So I walked over and kind of latched onto him, and he put his arm around me and we hugged. And I left, and I was struck by that moment. I felt like he, for the first time in a long time, was leaning into me without judgment or as much judgment. And I'll take it. I mean, I'll take that, So every day is a journey. I don't really know what the future is going to hold for us. I don't know when he passes what my role will be, if I'll be asked to speak a few words at his funeral, or I will be denied because they worry about what I might say. And of course, I would never betray my father's legacy and make it my soapbox. His casket will never be my soapbox. What will the next weeks and months look like? I don't know. But in my own mind, I've decided that sharing a physical space, a little bit of time, helping to meet a need is about the best I've got. And so far, it seems to be bearing some fruit.
Okay. Thanks for that. And
yeah.
I think one of the things I enjoyed about your podcast is personalizing this versus philosophizing this, right? And you do all of that, but I think it's enjoyable to watch you talk and watch the people that come on your show and the listeners talk about how this affects their lives versus what it means to be this. I think the entire gamut is important, and it also reminds me of the the kind of path that people follow when they get into atheism and humanism, and where they end up, whether they leave the organization after a few months, or whether they continue to be this staunch atheist who talks about philosophy the whole time, or whether, they come to other realizations and friendships and it just becomes a community affair. I think so many of us get a lot of things out of your show about our work we do locally. And I think one of the important things not to forget from those of us who maybe don't think as much about how this affects families and tears them apart and sometimes brings them together is that's important to realize. And without that realization, you won't understand what's going on in your friends' lives and in your family's lives, and even in your own life that you may not realize.
I'd like to throw something out. I know there are questioners and I don't want to betray their time, but I've been struck lately by the damage of tribalism and how we in the atheist culture are guilty of being tribal. I mean, I get tribes, the benefits of communities. I think we need community. Actually, the atheist movement and the Freethought movement and the humanist movement needs to be much better at community than we are. A lot of people, I think, are so nervous about appearing religious that they refuse to do anything as a group or connect in that way. And I think we're a communal species. We're better together in almost every way. But I lament how often we dismiss people because of a label. And, we talked about Christian nationalism. There are devout Christians who are against Christian nationalism. There's a website. I think it's Christians Against Christian Nationalism. And mega pastors like Tony Campolo and others are on our side in protecting the constitutional state church line. Pastor John Pavlovitz, he's a humanist above all. Yeah, he believes the Bible, but he sort of morphed his Bible so that it doesn't judge gay people and it doesn't condemn women, doesn't do all those things. But he had to do that because he has a genuine goodness about him, and we share those values. So in terms of humanistic behavior and changing the world for the better, John Pavlovitz and I, believer, non-believer, are actually allies in trying to better the world. And I sure would like to see us take a little more of a breath when we meet people who are of differing points of view. I'm not talking about the theocrats who are actively harming people, but people who might have a religious label or some kind of tribal label. And let's try to see them in three dimensions first, because I have become more and more convinced that so many times we will discover as human beings, we have much more in common than we have in opposition. And we take those potential adversaries and realize that they might in fact be allies. We are all the human condition. It's not always possible, but it's a pledge I've made to myself in my own life.
Yeah, it's something that I think we all do is we all put people in boxes, we all give people labels, and we all stereotype. And we may not think we do it all the time, but we do it all the time, right? You want to describe something to someone, you have to have some way to describe it. And you can't take a paragraph to say something that you think your friend would understand in the length of a bumper sticker. So we shorten things down to the shortest possible phrase, and we basically don't say much of anything other than what someone already thought we were going to say. So that stereotyping is absolutely the case. What I try to tell myself is that I know people that are in government and they're in religion that want to have those things merged. And simply because they're Christians or because they're Baptist or because they're Southern Baptist doesn't mean that every Southern Baptist that I meet is going to be like that. In fact, I have, I was going to bring up a conversation I had with one of my Southern Baptist pastor friends. And then I thought about the other one that you just mentioned, because I have one who is very much in favor of separation between church and state, and that's the Baptist Joint Committee webpage that you mentioned, Christians Against Christian Nationalism. I think they're spearheading that. And the other one who we can't have a conversation about this without completely disagreeing on the fundamentals when it comes to secularism, So we'll talk about that more if it's appropriate. But I got a couple more questions here from Reggie. Even though Christian fundamentalism is losing power slowly, it appears that consumer gullibility is on the rise. Do you think we are in danger of having dogmatic, powerful religions replaced with pseudoscience, pseudo-history, and pseudo-thinking beliefs?
Yes, I'm terrified. Look, I did a show with Andrew Seidel a while back, and we titled the show, Do We Live in a Shared Reality? And I don't think so. I think there is an encouragement of anti-science, anti-reason, conspiracy theorist thinking there is a gullibility. We live in a culture where there is so much slickly produced misinformation and so many merchants of pseudoscience and anti-science and cult thinking and authoritarianism and whatever going on, that we are going to continue to see the rise of unreason. And it terrifies me. Then you add the technology of things like the deep fake videos where they can paste someone's face on anybody, anywhere. And before you know it, now we could see someone who may be alleged to have said or done something that they never actually said or done. And we, as the viewer, would not be able to know the difference. And then there's the denial, but is the denial bogus? And what's real, what's not? I'm genuinely scared. I never thought a few years ago that a wild, crazy conspiracy theory like QAnon would ever really take hold. I mean, we've always seen the apocalyptic thinkers, but the idea that the Democratic Party is, as a league of political party, is enabling and carrying out the drinking of the blood of babies to sacrifice to Satan, right? To me, I think that is just so wild. That's so crazy that, oh, come on. There'll be a few French people who buy that, but hardly anybody. Come on, they know better than that. And when I see the alarming number of people who genuinely do believe there's a cabal of Satanists, potentially the Jew bankers, according to some of these narratives, who are running satellites over the country and have radio tracking devices in the COVID vaccines, who Moderna was part of the organization that gassed the Jews during the Holocaust, and Democrats, including Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, etc., are part of a conspiracy of blood-drinking, baby-sacrificing Satan worshipers. The amount of people who actually buy into that has made me terrified for the future. And the only thing I know to do is to continue to dismantle and debunk as loudly as I possibly can. I don't know what else to do. What else can we do? But no, I wish I had a magic bullet answer that would fix it, but I don't. I'm genuinely nervous about the months, years, and decade to come.
You know, we had Ben Radford from the Center for Skeptical Inquiry. He was on sometime, I think last year, maybe June or July, and one of the questions that came up was about QAnon. And I have to admit, and I'm sure Ben would as well, that we're part of the problem if we didn't have an answer ready to go back then. But how can we take any of this so seriously as to make it part of our study and expect that it's actually going to be relevant when you and I both would have thought that's so ridiculous that it couldn't be. And here it is on the news for months, the last several months of the Trump administration. I mean, I failed us to not understand what that was when that question was asked. And I think a lot of us just assumed it didn't matter.
I think some of it too speaks to there is the phenomenon in evangelical religions to respond to authoritarians. So when Donald Trump is anointed the savior, and then he spends 4 years as essentially a merchant of disinformation, wild conspiracy theory, anti-science, pseudoscience, distrust of science, they're all out to get us, and he's aligning himself with the Bible and the Christian church. If you have a culture of people who are primed to respond to savior figures and authoritarians, where they essentially are surrendering their minds and their futures to someone they feel is appointed to be over them and to feed them the truth, that to me is a huge part of why we're seeing 30% of Americans saying they refuse to get the vaccine for COVID. That's why you continue to have people who refuse to acknowledge the results of an absolutely legitimate presidential election. We are not living in a shared reality, and that's been fomented by a specific authoritarian to millions of people who respond, who have been religiously primed to respond positively to authoritarians.
Yeah, that's a good point. And your perspective on this is valuable. A couple of other things have come up. So since you mentioned he who we shouldn't name too often, do you think Trump will get elected again?
I don't. I don't want to be naive about this, but I just feel like he is, he started this blog that's supposed to be the next big thing. And, he's getting fewer hits on his blog than I think there was a pet finder. Petfinder.com is getting more hits than he is. I think, he's going to continue to flail and scream and try to get attention, but he ain't getting any younger. I think the Republican Party is splintered enough. And I think the results of the 2020 election were strong enough that it is highly unlikely that he will be able to get support past his fervent and highly religious base. It is my hope that we've had enough. But I'll tell you what terrifies me is, what if we had someone who was spinning a Christian nationalist narrative, who was in fact a con artist consolidating power, who was actually smart, someone who knew what he was doing, somebody who was more adept at manipulating people. I mean, Trump, he was a manipulator, but he wasn't all that smart. What happens if, now that we've seen how easily tens upon tens of millions of evangelicals are manipulated by the weaponization of religion, what happens if somebody who is genuinely an amazing master craftsman, a chess player who knows how to move the pieces, who is really all that smart, what happens if they try it next time? That gives me real concern. Won't be Trump, I don't think, but it may be somebody else, somebody smarter.
Right. Yeah. Can you imagine an effective 4 years under Donald Trump versus an ineffective 4 years, which is what we've got. They ineffectively did a whole hell of a lot of stuff that we can't undo very quickly. So I saw another one here. As religions start losing members, and this kind of, I can see this being answered either way, right? We can rationalize this one way or the other. As religion starts to lose members, are the remainder becoming more vehement?
Yes, they're like a cornered animal. I think in many ways they're much more dangerous. They're becoming more desperate. They're becoming crazier. Some of that, I think there's utility in watching how panicked they have become. Did you watch the prophesiers, the people who actually prophesied that God would help Trump win the election in 2020? And when he didn't, they all had egg on their faces. So they had to go to their people and say, well, either I was wrong, and some prophets actually apologized, or they had to say, well, actually, I'm right. It just hasn't been borne out yet. I think, it has been fruitful to help expose. This panic has helped to expose the charlatans. But in some ways, I think they become more dangerous. I think the insurrection of January 6th is a symptom of that. Many of these people, I'm going to guess, thought they were doing God's good work. And so while the numbers of the theocrats are in fact going down, the theocrats that remain will become more and more desperate to retain privilege and power. And I am nervous about what they are capable of.
Yeah, I think you said that very well. The thing that I was thinking about that I would answer with also is, people have a megaphone that they didn't have 20, 30 years ago. If this megaphone had existed then, I think we'd be hearing these flails and cries then, even though they were bigger and badder and more in power. I do think that the media that we're using and following now has a lot to do with who gets heard and who gets followed. Yeah. And honestly, if Twitter had gone away for Donald Trump 4 years ago, he may never have been president. You know what I mean? Or 5 years ago, rather.
Yeah, I buy that.
So last question here, and then we'll turn off the microphone lock and folks can chime in. So this is from James White, the Village's Humanist, which I think might be Jim or one of our other friends over there. Does Seth have any recommendations on how to reach out to clergy in our community? And that's Jim from the Village's Humanists.
Reach out in what capacity?
The Villages, by the way, there's a new movie out I haven't watched yet, but I want to see what's up with the Villages, and there's this movie, and I'll put that in the chat. Go ahead, Seth.
Reach out in what capacity? With what end? Reach out to ally, to humanist pastors? Are you trying to deconvert the faithful? Reach out in what capacity?
Thanks, Seth, for a really great presentation. We'd love to have you speak to us also. We're in the white power center of the universe in the Villages, and also, like you, the evangelical belt, and so we feel like it to some degree a minority. And there's occasional editorials that get written that we respond to, but there's generally some hostility. And we do have one or two clergy that we talk to on occasion, but the thought occurred to us that reaching out more to some of these and letting them know that we're not Satanists. Well, not exactly that,
No,
but
I got you.
yeah.
Well, you guys had Ryan Cragen. In fact, that was the first time I'd ever met him, is when Free Flow invited him to be a part of it. Sociologist from the University of Tampa. And his research as a sociologist revealed that the number one most effective way to help reach people to change perceptions and even change minds is to change someone's social circle. Natalie was talking to some friends the other night. She said, before I met Seth, if you had told me that he was an atheist, I would have had nothing to do with him. But I got to know him as a man first. And then, he was coming out of his faith and all that. And because I saw him in 3 dimensions, and then I began to become introduced to people who were atheist in the atheist community and saw that they were beautiful people, I realized that I should see past the label, that I would have denied myself the opportunity to know some real goodness in my life. And that has been the one tactic that I have held to when trying to connect with people who have either dehumanized us or marginalized us or don't understand us or are afraid of us, is to try to spend person-to-person, one-on-one time over coffee or dinner or whatever, and to be human beings in that space and not talk about anything. When I got a neighbor who's a pastor, okay? He's a worship pastor for a local church. We stand diametrically opposed on theology. But he and his wife came over for dinner 2 months ago. We're all vaccinated, We had dinner and we didn't talk religion. We just talked about life, and we laughed and had a great time and connected as human beings. And he's one of the most beautiful people in my life. He's just a dear, dear, dear friend. After all of that sort of transpired, we've had a few conversations about belief and about atheism and this and that. But because we had connected as human beings first, the conversations that took place afterward happened in an arena of safety. I hold to the reality that people don't change their minds if they feel unsafe or attacked. People change their minds from a position of safety. So I think we can get together with people and foster that, that human connection and allow them to be reminded that, you're safe. I'm a good steward of you. I'm not evil. I'm not going to drag you through the mud. I'm not going to attack you. I really want to spend time with you. And then if the conversations come up organically down the way, people have a chance to exchange those ideas in an atmosphere of safety. And perhaps in that safe atmosphere is where horizons can be expanded. That's the best I've got.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you so much.
Let me second that. And thanks for the question. And I will make sure that, Seth, you connect with the villages so that event might happen in the coming months, if possible. But I want to say that something that we've done since 2012 as an organization, which is right around the time we started, is reach out to folks who think like us when they write an article in the paper, right? That happened in 2012, and that built a relationship that we have today. I serve on the Interfaith Council of Central Florida as the board secretary. And all those people that I know from, different faith traditions around here, some of them liberal, some of them conservative, they all know me as a person because of that engagement. Not because I'm the person on TV or the person that had the lawsuit or the person that wrote the op-ed, but because I got to know them over coffee. What I would suggest, if you're trying to engage the faith community where you are, is don't exclude the far right wing nut jobs who write into the paper and say how horrible atheists are. Talk to them as well, right? Invite them for coffee, right? Don't accost them, but invite them for coffee and say, hey, I just wanted you to get to know you and get to know me. Make that happen. But also don't ignore the people that are already with you, right? Most of the minority religious traditions and many Christians are already with you. And there may be an interfaith group that you are near, but most people that are doing interfaith are liberal religious people, because the fundamentalists, they don't want anything to do with interfaith for the most part. But there are some conservative denominations who do participate in interfaith. But on the whole, the most fundamentalist Christians and other traditions are not going to be doing interfaith. So the interfaith community is a welcoming place, but you may have to make it more welcoming depending upon how rural or how urban you are.
I don't want to trot on your time too much. I don't know where the clock is, and I'm good. But I've never browbeaten someone into an epiphany. Like, I think mockery has its place on the macro stage, the large stage, but in the one-on-ones, I never, ever, ever try to marginalize or mock religion. I'm doing a show in a few weeks with a psychiatrist and a computational biologist, and they talk about the human tendency to reject ideas that are against the ideas they have that are aligned with their identity. Meaning that if I am presented with something that brushes up against an idea that I have that's associated with my identity, the same parts of my brain, the amygdala, the same portions of my brain fire up that also fire up in terms of a physical threat. So we as human beings respond to an ideological threat just like we would a physical threat. When people feel threatened, when they feel unsafe, they will double down, the fight or flight kicks in. And so again, that leans back to the idea that when we're speaking about people's deeply held, deep-seated beliefs related to identity, we have to foment or foster an atmosphere of safety first, of humanity first. And then, even though we get impatient, we vibrate in our chairs, we just want to get to the meat of the matter. I think we have to play a longer game, chess, not checkers. And then when the opportunities organically arise, we can begin the conversations that speak to identity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to that by simply saying, if we presume that the way we get things done is the way that talking heads on TV and even podcasts and shows like this, if we assume that the conversations that those people are having are the way to live, we get Donald Trump, right? We get reactionary conversation. We get rhetoric. We get the bullshit that, doesn't get us anywhere other than getting us likes or more people at a conference. It's the fact.
I've had to limit my time on social media for that way. The idea of expressing nuanced life in 280 characters, instead it becomes the jab, the one-liner, the shot, the screenshot, everybody's trying to win, everybody's yelling, nobody's listening. I found that it started to change me. So I've really tried to draw back. I use social media, but for reasons of mental health, I've tried to partition that down a little bit and try to have more and more real life, real world conversations.
For sure. Absolutely. Well, I think we're going to cut it there. We're way over and we're very grateful, Seth. It was wonderful to see you and hear you, of course, for all of your fans who just love your voice. So thank you for bringing it. And we're looking forward to seeing you at Free Flow. And I put that date in the chat here, and I'll mention it again in a minute, but the dates are March 4th, 5th, and 6th in Orlando, and Seth will be there. I think this year he opens I think this year he closes since last year he opened. He goes back and forth. He's an anchor, and we always anchor the beginning and the end. So, and I mentioned on the YouTube stream that you've been here since every Free Flow since 2013. So
it is. I am not joking. This is not hyperbole. I'm not trying to I'm not. There is something special about Florida Freethought. There is something electric and special about the way the temperature of this specific event that has made it my single. I do probably I used to do 30 to 35 dates a year, and Free Flow is at the top of my list. And there's something about the way that event is planned and implemented, the atmosphere, the attitudes of the people, the goodwill. It's magical. I mean, I don't know how to say it. It sounds like a Hallmark movie, but I cannot wait to come down and see you guys next March. And I will be watching the calendar and checking off the days until March. And I look forward to seeing you then. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, we're always glad to have you, Seth. It's great to see you. And we never get enough time there to hang out and chat, but it's always nice to hug and have a drink together. So we look forward to seeing you. Thanks for giving us some of your valuable time on this, the Lord's Day. We're all fortunate and humbled by the blessing you've bestowed upon us. So,
amen, brother. Let us bow and reflect. Okay. Well, you guys be good, be safe, and thanks again.
Take care. So before we let everyone else go, quick reminder about the next event, and I missed the date when I opened up. That is June 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern. That again will be Florida House Member Representative Carlos Smith, an out and proud agnostic, gay, Latinx lawmaker, Florida's first. He will join us for another legislative update. We're continuing our online social events and in-person events for the next few months. So as we try to transition, bear with us, as things probably won't be confusing, but we want to make sure you don't assume that event is online or in person when it is the opposite. So pay attention to that. We don't want you to miss out on getting connected with us, whether you choose to do that in person or online. Find out how to join us on Meetup at meetup.com/CFL Freethought. And if you are wanting an activity email, let us know via the URL tinyurl.com/CFFC newsletter. Putting that into the chat now, so you have that. And if you need help connecting, just reach out and let us know. The email for the organization is info@cflfreethought.org. With that, we'll let you get back to your weekend, and we will see you very soon. Bye now.